Hello plant lovers, Matthew in Melbourne saying thank you very much for finding me. Welcome to my humble channel, the continuing adventures of me, an amateur growing cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne in Australia. I post every week. If that is of any interest, do hit subscribe and hit the notification button so you can know exactly when I share my amateur ramblings every week. And this week, plant lovers, we are going to look at my nobile type of orchids that are in bloom and a quick generalization about their care tips and some unusual behavior. But first, let us have a look at this. Isn't that the most fabulous orchid? So this is Dendrobium nobile. Ta-da! As you can see, a very, very beautiful flower, and I just love that dark purple that's right in the center there. I bought this in midwinter, a healthy young plant with 4 canes, as you can see, but no suggestion of flower swelling. So I was quite amazed when it did produce 2 buds this season, because I had fully expected it's going to take a whole year to sort of settle in and wait till next season and blah, blah, blah. But no, it's burst into bloom now, and I'm thrilled because I don't have Dendrobium nobile, and there it is in flower for me. So Dendrobium nobile is the species type. The native range of this is the Himalayas, so it stretches right across from sort of Bhutan, Nepal, India, all the way across into southern China and Vietnam, etc. So quite a wide range, and it is described as cool to hot, which I find amazing that it's that versatile, which means it obviously grows at a variety of altitudes, including quite high, which means it can take reasonably cool temperatures. So this one I am going to grow outdoors all year, undercover so it doesn't get rained on, but it is going to be subject to those cool winter minimums we can sometimes get in Melbourne, which can get down to below 5 degrees Celsius, which is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So not freezing, just above, chilly, let's just say. But I will be giving it exactly the same care as I give my other nobile types, which means plenty of light in winter, but almost comparatively dry rest. So certainly no fertilizer during winter. And I don't never water them throughout the winter period, but I do sometimes give them a little moisture, particularly if you see that the canes are looking a bit shriveled. And I do that when it's going to be relatively sunny and warm, and there's a good chance of evaporation, so the medium isn't going to stay soggy and damp and cold at night, because that is often death for an orchid. So nobile types tend to flower in, depends on the season and where you are, but perhaps very late winter, early spring, and this is now quite late spring that this one has burst forth, which is fine by me. And as you can see, it's flowering on canes that have lost their leaves, so it is deciduous, and this new growth, which will be last year's growth, still has its leaves. Next year, these leaves will start to drop off. We'll hopefully then get flowers on this one, and pretty soon, hopefully, I will start to get new growths from the bottom, and the whole magic process begins again. And the important thing to remember with this type of dendrobium is these naked canes can look quite unattractive, but they are capable of blooming from a point where it hasn't bloomed before. So don't be tempted to snip them off. Only ever take off a cane if you can see it is completely dead. So it's completely shriveled and grey and lifeless and brittle to the touch. Otherwise, you can see these have still got energy in them. They've still got life to live and love to give. So don't get snip happy. But, and this happens to me quite a bit, sometimes my nobile orchids will start to send up their new growths in winter. And that means you've got to water and fertilize it because it needs all the energy to grow. So I guess the rule of thumb is just watch what it's doing and respond accordingly. So saying, one of mine that did start to grow wonderfully in winter, I was just really careful about watering it because it's outside all the time, and I didn't want it to get really wet and then have a really cold nighttime minimum, which could have been a death knell for it. So again, I watered it more than I would normally at that season, but I also did it on a warmish, sunnyish winter day so that the medium in the pot had time to sort of dry out a little bit more before the night time. So there you go. Again, you just got to read the signs, I suppose, and let them do what they want to do. We are having, as they say in meteorological circles, a La Niña year here in Australia, and Australia's weather patterns are controlled by the temperature of the Pacific, which can cause La Niña or El Niño weather conditions, which really change the nature of the weather on the East Coast. So La Niña tends to mean that we have wetter, cooler summers and El Niño means we have hotter, drier ones with often quite cataclysmic results, fire, floods, etc. So perhaps it's that weather cycle that caused Euryalus to bloom very, very early in the season. Anyway, let's look at the video and see what you think. This is the first nobile type cab off the rank for me. First of all, let me tell you what it is. It is Dendrobium Euryalus. This year, this orchid decided to have 2 flushes of flowers. And the curious thing was it produced buds very early in the season. So for me, this generally flowers in spring here in Australia, and it's usually at its peak around now, which is November. So you see the flowers are gorgeous and it's covered in blooms. But the odd thing was it had a flush of flowers in September, very early, and has sort of been in continuous bloom ever since. So September, October, November, that's 3 months. I'm very happy it had blooms for that period of time, but it's never done that for me before, sort of 2 distinct flushes. So I'm wondering, plant lovers, if you have had similar experiences with nobile types, that they do in fact have 2 flushes quite close together in the season. Anyway, interesting. The first flush of blooms weren't as dense and as thick as these, but they did occur on some of the same canes. So there was a group of buds that matured and opened first, while the others were still very small or hadn't quite formed. And then there was this second amazing flush. So I was quite surprised. I thought the first flush was going to be it. Wasn't that great, bit disappointed, and then ta-da! There you go. This one is a beauty, and there is a very delicate fragrance. It's not a fabulous fragrance, but it's there nonetheless. But this one I love. I love that little touch of purple on the lip of the blooms, and it's a great flower for me. And it is, as you can see, and I'll come in and show you, throwing out all its new growth for next year. And as we know, with this type of orchid, you need the canes to mature. They then become semi-deciduous, and those are the canes that are going to bloom for you the following season. So the aim of the game, as with most of these dendrobiums, is to promote vegetative growth in the growth season, which for me here is early spring. Let those canes mature and give you all the blooms next year. So the more mature canes you have, the more flowers you have. That simple. And although everyone says a dry winter, mine is not completely dry, because I don't feel in nature it would be completely dry for 3 months. So I will mist it if it's a warm winter's day, and I will give it a little bit of water, not a drenching, but just a little bit every now and then. So maybe once every 3 weeks, just to keep the medium a little bit damp, a little bit moist every now and then. So not a huge watering, but I don't let it completely desiccate and dry out. Anyway, that's me, and it seems quite happy. And as with most of the dendrobiums as well, once you see all the growth coming along, it's time to start fertilizing it, and I give it a little topical treatment of slow release fertilizer grains, literally about 2 or 3, slightly more than I give to other orchids, because it's getting to be quite a big specimen and there's a lot of growth. So maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon rather than 3 grains. And then during the spring and summer season, I will give it regularly irregular liquid fertilizer of either a seaweed based or an orchid specific liquid fertilizer that I dilute to probably about 1/8 of the recommended dose on the packet. And a viewer had asked me where to get sort of nobile type orchids from in Australia, and the answer is eBay. Or some online orchid sellers do have them, but you don't often see them in shops, which is a curious thing because they're so beautiful and relatively easy to grow here. Anyway, I actually got this one as a little single cane on eBay, and it increased in size dramatically. So I am very happy with this. And in fact, it was my first nobile type orchid. So there we go. This one, Dendrobium Euryalus, is definitely one for you if you can give it that dry-ish but not completely dry winter with a little bit of stronger, perhaps morning sunlight and then dappled light for the rest of the day. They do need that temperature change and light change in winter and the dryness to really stimulate flowers and promote good growth for the following season. Okay, isn't it a stunner? That was my first nobile type dendrobium, and I bought it on eBay quite a few years ago now, and it was just literally one naked cane, I think. And that very first year, it produced one little flower at the top, and I was so excited. I grew it on a balcony in the city, so it had dappled shade, but it was quite exposed, and it just grew like the clappers. As you can see, it's quite a big specimen now. It sends up multiple new growths every year. They mature well, it blooms beautifully. very, very easy orchid for me to look after, which is why I sort of thought, these nobile types, because they are often high altitude and can take those cooler winter temperatures, I'm going to really commit to them. Anyway, this one is the species. I'm very happy to welcome it into the fold. I've made other Dendrobium videos, which I will link below, and I think I've got a Dendrobium playlist, which I'll also link below. And I bought this, plant lovers, from a seller called Cape Oasis, which is based in Queensland, which is much further north than me, and tropical or subtropical, depending which bit of Queensland you're in. So very different climate. They also have an eBay shop here in Australia. Obviously no use to you living outside of Australia, I'm sorry, but sometimes it's always worth just having a look at a grower's website, even if it's not in your region, just to get some ideas about things that you might not have seen or heard of before. I do that. Anyway, I will put their name below as well, so you can go and have a look at their website should you wish. So plant lovers, thank you very much. From Dendrobium nobile and I in bloom, we are saying over and out. Thank you very much. I do post every week, so hit subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next week with another installment of my amateurish journey through growing orchids here in Melbourne. Until then though, plant lovers, Dendrobium nobile and I signing out and saying see you next week.